All right, we are about to go live here. I'm going to wait for some people to jump on the call. And again, if you're watching this on replay, I'm going to suggest to you, you go to about minute number 3 when I'll probably jump into the content. Right now, I'm just going to wait for people to jump on board. I did announce this live session, so I just felt like, again, sharing some great content with you guys. So I will wait till folks jump on board. And today's topic is going to be one about creating value. The question I often get is, Victor, how do you create value in the customer's eyes? And really, this depends on what type of business you're in. If you're in B2B, there's one way of creating value. If you're in B2C, obviously a third way. If you're selling to residential, there's another way of creating value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on, if you're in the B2B space, if you're selling to another business, how do you position your value? How do you get people to really focus in on what you're trying to sell and the value of what you're trying to sell, and to get them to look away from price? Okay, so that's what this is going to be about. So great, got some folks joining. That's good. Who do I have here? Let me pull over, see who I have here. Jason, man, thank you for joining me, man. Appreciate that. It's early, brother, at least on this side, on the East Coast. UAE, always in the house, man. I love it, man. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate that. All right, you know I like to hear where you're from, man. Benzo, baby, what's happening? My Puerto Rican brother, man. We got to get some food. I know. We got to do something about that. Tanzania, not Tanzania, right? Tanzania, man. So thanks, Joseph, for joining, man. Let me see who else we got here. Let's see. Orlando, nice place to be, man. Not a bad place. Hi, Victor. I got you, brother. I got you right there. I mean, you're always like, dude, you're always there, man. Singapore in the house. All right, man. Dig it. I love it, man. I love it. Let me see who else we got. You guys are scrolling quick. Oh, Nigeria. I like when Nigeria jumps in, man. Appreciate it. By the way, Linda, what time is it in Nigeria? Because I know it's got to be super early, man. India in the house. India's always in the house. Anand Murthy. Thank you, man. Thank you for joining. And we got, let's see, is this Henry? Yeah, Victor, long time. Follow from... Wow, man. Look, dude, long time, Henry. Thanks for joining, man. Like I said, we're going to have some fun here. We got Europe in the house. Nairobi. Man, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong, but I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to say Mwiri Marithi. If I got it close, man, just give me a 1, man. If I screwed it up, well, I'm sorry about that, all right? We got South Africa in the house. I got to pull up my hometown here. We got Chicago. Northwest side. If you know where Ashland and Wabansie is at, Angel, that's where I was born and raised, man. Let me see who else is. Hey, all right, I got the spelling and the name right. All right, who else is here? One more, and let's see what we got here. Here, your subscriber on the Sales Velocity Academy. Thoroughly enjoying the videos. DR, I love it, man. Thank you, man. It's a great academy, man. Like I said, it's great content on there. So, again, you should check it out if you haven't checked it out already. And so, by the way, new course is coming. I got a real good course coming your way for the Academy, so you're going to look forward. If you love trying to stand out in your presentations, the new course I'm putting together is going to help you. So, again, if you're not a member of the Sales Velocity Academy, why the heck not? Who else is here? Let me see. This is a long one. Okay, let's see what this one's all about. Hi, sir. My question is very simple and complicated as well. Well, see, that's a bad start already, Varad. I haven't even started talking, and you want to throw a complicated question at me already. There are so many marketing strategies on different aspects, but is there any proper formula to quantify which strategy to apply? That's another conversation. Different strategies. It's such a big question, Varad. I'm not trying to avoid your question. It's just such a big question. That could be a conversation in and of itself. So we'll have to do that some other time, but I appreciate you being here, man. Thank you. This one, I'm actually about to walk into a meeting with a client and I saw your live notification. I'm like, yikes. Good luck with the deal, Linda. Make it happen, man. Close that deal. Last one here. Let me see who's this. Victor's Value Trinity. You understand, man. Hey, so today I got a new formula. And again, based on my book, bear with me. This book right here. So again, if you're in the Sales Velocity Academy, just download it. And again, I'm not showing you this to sell you this because I don't really care about that. Is that I just always like to give you my mindset. I got a new model. This is 50 models for effective selling. It's the way my brain thinks. And I have a new model for you today. And I don't think I included it in this book. Like I said, this book is going to be updated. I got also a new book coming out, hopefully in June. I'm kind of delaying it a little bit. It's all on upselling. So Like I said, if you're watching me on the live feed, you know what I'm going to do? During one of my live feeds, I'm going to give you a link so you can download it when it's ready. So let's get into it, man. Let's get into this. So what I want to do today is, again, I'm setting the scenario. We're a B2B organization. Even if you're not B2B, you're going to enjoy this process. But let's say you're a B2B, you're trying to figure out, how do I quantify my value? Now, if you're in the Sales Velocity Academy, there's a program in there called Value-Centric Selling. This one ties nicely into what I'm about to show you. So what I want to do is give you a simple mindset formula for creating a value presentation. I'm not talking about a value proposition. Value propositions to me are 9 times out of 10, they're very weak, right? Customers want to know, if I'm buying this, if I'm investing a lot of money, what am I getting out of this? And they want you to give them that answer. So let's say, for example, you're selling, whether it's a software package, let's say it's a large piece of equipment, whatever it may be, something very big that the customer has to invest in. So the question always comes back to, as my friend Leon Henry pointed out, is, you remember when I talked about the value trinity, right? Remember the value trinity? This one you have to record in your head. This is like so valuable. In B2B, they want to know 3 things. How can you help me increase revenue, reduce expenses, or expand market share, right? In other words, that's what they want to hear. If you're trying to sell a product or a service, what they want to know is, how is this product or service going to help me increase revenue, reduce costs, or expand market share, right? So record that. You have to know this, the value trinity. This is going to be like your GPS system, because every feature, every benefit that your product or service has to be tied to one of these 3, or 2 of them, or all 3 of them. If you can do all 3, that's the trifecta right there. That's the full trinity. So keep in mind, whatever product or service you're offering, you got to tie it back into, how does it increase revenue, reduce costs, or expand market share? So that's the first model. That's the easy one. Got it? You're locked in. Now, I want to give you a formula for putting your presentation together. You know how sometimes we're trying to put a great presentation together, and sometimes we get lost in the details. Like sometimes we spend too much time messing with the fonts, the graphics, or we lose ourselves. So here's what I want you to think about when you're putting together your next value presentation. And I'm going to give you this acronym. I'm going to call it LEAP. And then I'll put a square there. So that's your acronym, okay? So as you're thinking about the product or service you're trying to sell to your customer, and I'm telling you, if you're in B2B, really pay attention to this. Is going to change how you present, but then how you present more effectively. Let's say that you're selling this product or service and you really understand what the customer is trying to do. In other words, you understand the customer's process or processes, right? So the first thing you have to do, the L stands for locate the value. So how do you locate the value? Now, let me define this for you. Locate the value means, in their process, let's say you're selling to, again, let's take a company with a large sales force, right? And let's say you're selling some type of new application to help their salespeople. Your job is to figure out, how do they sell? What's their sales process, right? And then where does your product fit? In other words, where can it help them? So for example, let's say that you've studied the customer enough that you know that their sales process is something like this. It has so many steps, right? So they start from first meeting and all the way to the close, and you know that that's their sales process. If I'm selling a product, the first thing I have to ask myself is, where in this process does my product or service help them? Maybe my product or service helps them like right here. When they do prospecting, that's where I can help them. And also because I have marketing automation, I can also help them right there. So I can say to my customer, I can help you in these 2 locations. I understand your process. I can help you here, and I can help you here. If you want to get a great visual of this, think of manufacturing. Like I remember reading a couple of years ago the book Toyota Way. The Toyota Way basically is, the car company, Toyota, and how they actually look at systems and efficiencies. And the Toyota Way is really a mindset, not a philosophy, how to become more efficient. And what they do is that if they have an assembly line, this is an assembly line in this case, what they do is they ask themselves, where can I become more efficient? In what areas can I combine processes? In what areas can I eliminate processes, right? Or maybe again, combine, eliminate, or again, add, whatever it may be. my point to you is, where in their sales process or in their process in general does your product add value? Once you locate where you can help them, maybe you can help them on the marketing side. Maybe you have a more efficient way of doing marketing automation. Maybe you can help them there. If they're in sales, maybe you can shorten their sales cycle by, maybe it's proposal development. Maybe your software helps them develop proposals and helps them do it much faster. Whatever it may be, where does your product increase revenue, reduce costs, or expand market share is the next step. If I can locate where I can help them in the process, then this stands for, now I want to extract the value. Okay? Now, this is important. Hang in there with me, man. Hang in there with me. This is where you have to extract the value, because now you've located where you can help them. But now, if I've located where I can help them, here, let's make this one green. If I located where I can help them, the question now becomes is, how can I help them increase their revenue, reduce their costs, or expand their market share? And can I put a dollar value on it? Now, maybe it's not dollars directly. Maybe by accelerating the process with your software, a task, for example, proposal development. A proposal used to take 2 hours. With your software, it now takes 30 minutes. You've just saved an hour and a half. 1.5 hours, right, per salesperson. Then what we can do is, for example, if I just saved you 1.5 hours in your process, 1.5 hours, and then I know that on average you do 3 proposals, that means I saved you 4.5, if I did my math right? Yeah, right? 4.5 hours. But that's per salesperson per day. If I have 10 salespeople, that means I take that number and I multiply that by 10. I now save them 40 hours per day. Okay? Now, if I multiply that by 5, that's 200 hours. If I multiply that by 21 days in a working month, you can run the numbers. So in other words, this becomes the value that my product or service, in other words, I begin to quantify how my product, a simple software package, can help them in actually doing this, their job. So let me go ahead and erase this real quick. You get the idea on the quantification. So now, that's what I mean by extract value. How do you begin to quantify the value? So now let's go slow here. I've located where my product can help them save time or save money. Those are usually 2 variables, right? If I can save you time, I can save you money, or vice versa. Now, I've identified the location. I've located. Now, I want to extract it. What does extract mean? I want to extract the value. I want to document how I saved them money and how much. I quantify the value. Again, if you're part of the Sales Velocity Academy, check out my course called Value-Centric Selling. I give you examples on how to calculate these numbers, how to calculate the return, how to find return on investment, total cost of ownership, break-even points, all that. So I show you how to locate value. Now, I've located it. I've quantified the value, number of hours, total hours per salespeople, total hours per month, and then I can put a dollar value on that. Now, I have this content. This is me preparing for a meeting, by the way. This is me preparing. I've located where I can help them. I've extracted the value. Now, the A here stands for you begin to, let me get back to this. What you're going to do now is you're going to assemble. By assemble, I mean you're going to give them, assemble the actual presentation. Now, this is the storytelling piece. This is the most important part. By the way, value is important. Locating value. Assemble means, how do we begin to build a story? How do we begin to build a story, and how do we lay out the information? Now, for example, I often remind people that what you say first versus what you say second versus what you say third makes all the difference in the world. 3 people can tell 3 different stories 3 different ways, but usually the person with the best sequence has the best presentation. So sequence does matter. If you've been to my courses or my workshops, you know I always ask this question. If I walk into a room and the glass is filled halfway up with water, is the glass half empty or half full? If you believe it's half full, press 1. If you believe it's half empty, press 0. This is important that you do this. Show your glass, it's filled halfway with water. If you believe it's half full, give me a 1. Give me a 1. If you believe it's half empty, give me a 0. Give me your numbers right now. Because I want you to think about this. This is an important example in terms of what sequencing is all about. And the majority of people are going to say it's half full. And there's some that's going to say, hey, it's half empty, right? But what's the real answer? What's the real answer? The answer is, it depends. They did this interesting study that what they did is this. Pretend there's two separate rooms, right? Two separate rooms. And they did this study where they walked into one room with an empty glass and they filled it halfway. And then they asked people, is that half empty or half full? And the majority said, it's half full, right? Empty glass, filled it up halfway. The majority said it was half full. But then they walked into another room with a full glass, and this time they emptied out half of it. And the majority said what? It was half empty. So depending on how I walk into the room, pretty much determined whether it was half empty or half full. My point here is that sequence matters. What I show you first versus what I show you second. If I show you an empty glass first and I fill it up halfway, you're going to think it's half full. But if I showed you a full glass first and I emptied out half of it, you're going to think it's half empty. That's the importance of sequencing. So when I talk about assembly, it's how do you assemble your presentation to tell the story? And for example, let's say you found 3 ways to save them money with your product. What you're going to do is begin with the smaller amount, right? How much you can save them, tell that story. Then you're going to show them a bigger amount, and then you're going to show them really the biggest savings they're going to get. We could all agree that this is a better sequence than going big to small. As we go up, we begin to add more value. That's what I mean about assembling your presentation. Assemble it in such a way that it tells that value story as you build it. The final P, this stands for basically propose, right? I always remind people that if you've shown them the value, you've extracted the value, you've assembled a great presentation, you told them, here's how much money you can save, then you have to have the proposal. You have to have the ask. What are you asking for in return? What do you want? Now, you may think, well, that's obvious, Victor, that we should propose something at the end. No, it's not obvious, because studies have shown that two-thirds of salespeople never ask for the order at the end of a presentation. There's no ask. So I want to remind you that if this is your presentation sequence, you always should start somewhere here. Look at your ask first. What are you going to ask for? And then build the story backwards. That's one way of doing it. But again, when you propose something, make sure you ask for something. Now keep in mind that I'm doing this very quickly, but what I would do is, if I'm doing this today, first, I would analyze. My first conversations with the customer would be just to try to understand their process, right? Really understand how they process, how they go through it. I would ask all kinds of questions. So when you get this, you do this. So when your salespeople do that, do they enter the data here or do they do this? Do they open up an app or do they do this? Do they open this or do they do that? I'm asking these questions because I want to discover the full process. Because if I understand the full process, then I begin to extract value, which means I begin to identify where I can actually help them in their process. This is the magic of selling. When we're talking business to businesses, once you understand the customer's process, and once you figure out where you can help the customer become more efficient, the third piece is actually quantify, right? Or the second piece is quantifying, extracting the value, and then we assemble a great presentation, and then we ask for something at the end. It's a very simple model. LEAP. By the way, the double P stands for propose, present, or present, propose. Take your pick. But hopefully that will give you some framework when you're building a B2B value-centric type of presentation. Anyway, I'll take any questions you guys have. Hopefully you found that interesting. I think it's interesting. I think it's a cool model. I think by the way, the toughest part in this model, I think the toughest part is always trying to do this right here, which is to extract the value, right? How do you pull out value? And the question, by the way, pushback I always get is, Victor, can you quantify? Some things can't be quantified, and I argue all the time. You can always quantify anything. You can quantify anything. And so in the courses I show how to actually quantify almost anything. You can quantify time, you can quantify hours, you can quantify dollars, you can quantify anything. But if you can't tell me how much money you're going to save or how much value you're going to bring, how much revenue I'm going to gain, how much my costs go down, how much money I'm going to save, or how you can help me expand the market share. Remember, all this should be aimed at those 3 things. How do you increase revenue, reduce costs, or expand market share? These are 2 models that you pull together. Very simple to apply. So I'm going to end here and take some questions and see what you guys got, because I see a lot of things popping up here, and you guys are coming at me fast, man. All right. Does this apply for presenting physical product to a retailer? Absolutely. So if you're talking about, again, I have to know what the product is. But remember, when you put a product on the shelf in a retailer, remember, if you can prove that your product can move faster, because when you're dealing with retailers, they're more concerned about inventory turns, right? How fast can they move that product? And if you can show that your product can move faster based on whatever process you have or whatever packaging you have, then that would be a way I would argue that. Without knowing more than that, Mike, I say yes. It's a matter of figuring it out. All right, let's see what we got here. I'm just pulling them up at random. Simple yet powerful framework. Thank you. Hello, Kileo. I think I got that right. Thank you. Let me see this one right here. How do you quantify a pest control service company? Get that one a lot. One of my biggest clients is Orkin, Rollins, right? And so I've worked with them many years. And so one of the things they'd have to do is quantify. We would always quantify damage. That would be one of the things. One is that you quantify damage, right? How much damage is not having pest control doing? For example, if you have infestation, what does that cost? How much damage is that going to be to repair? For example, and I'm looking at my door here, if I have roach infestations inside the wall and it starts eating away at that door, how much is it going to cost to repair that door? But second, if I'm thinking about selling the house in the future, that's another question I ask to qualify the opportunity. I would have to ask, if customers find damage behind the wall, again, how much is that going to cost you? How is that going to impact your ability to sell your house? So there's different ways, because, when you look at pest control, it's not just pest control, right? We can talk about ventilation systems and everything that impacts the house itself. So in working with Rollins, it was very interesting how they used visual impact to actually quantify value. By that I mean, in many cases, here, I'll give you a visual example. I think you'll enjoy this. And one of the things that they do, which I think is brilliant, is when they do a walk through a house, they have a software package that actually lists all the rooms. So let's say that there's 3 rooms, right? So when they go to each room, they have a tablet with them, and they're taking pictures all the time. And so as soon as they take a picture, they attach it here. If they take another picture, there. They take pictures where they see problems. And what they then do is come back, and when they do the proposal, that kitchen table conversation with the customer, what they then do is says, in bedroom number 1, here's what we found. They go click, and they click on that, and the picture is so impactful sometimes because of the infestation or the problem that they're having. So keep in mind that one way to also create value is to also show the customer the impact of not taking any action. In other words, your kids are sleeping in this room. Would you really want your kids to have to deal with that? Because these problems are going to get worse. So find a way to do that, and I think you'll impact them even more. Let's see what we got here. How do you decide proposal value? Is there any system to decide? I don't know what that means. I got to be honest. How do you decide proposal value? I don't know what that means. The value is the value. You know what I mean? I don't know how to answer that. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, how would you suggest quantifying branding? So branding is, in other words, how do you quantify me not being known in the market, right? So let's look at it the other way around. When we talked about the value trinity, hello, Kaleo, remember we talked about expand market share and the inability to grow your business because you're not branding. I would ask the customer if today, again, if it's a new company versus an existing company, right? So we know that if you're an existing company, today, let's say year 2020, your market share is X, right? 10%, right? Let's just say their market share is 10%. I'm making this up, right? So if I'm going to try to quantify branding, the first thing I look at is what did they do the year before? How much market share did they have? Was there a delta? So let's go both ways here. So again, 10%, right? But let's say that last year their market share was 11%. They just dropped 1%. We can then argue what that 1% really means, right? Now, let's take the other thing. Let's say that it was 9% the year before. In other words, they were low. This time they went up to 10%. They increased 1%, right? And I can ask them, what was that 1% bump for you? What did that mean to your business? They're going to say, well, it meant about $1 million worth of business. So if we could increase our branding and move those numbers up by 1%, if we can get close to that, if we can move your image, move your branding so you can get more exposure, could we possibly get another 0.5% bump with our branding? And I'd find a number like that. But I would look back into history, see what they're doing, and then move forward. If it's a smaller company and you can't quantify it, that becomes difficult because there are no numbers. So there has to be some numbers, okay? Anyway, that was the short answer to a very big one. So then this question is, let's see, this one is, can you go into detail on B2C, business and telecom sales with service, quantifying value versus traditional cable versus streaming platform? So can we go into detail on B2C telecom sales? Cable TV maybe is what you're talking about? Quantifying value, traditional cable versus streaming platforms. So what are you trying to argue here, Henry? So the detail, B2C telecom sales with service. So you're doing services, because I mean, we've given up cable, we're now on streaming platforms, right? So if you're asking me, how do you create value for cable TV over a streaming platform? Hit me back again. Is that the question, Henry? Because I'm not understanding. And I know you guys are trying to keep the question short, but again, I need enough detail to kind of play with it a little bit. What can you suggest in developing good questions to better extract the right information? Good questions. So, Jason, work it backwards. I mean, if you're going to meet with somebody, let's say it's a B2B conversation, right, Jason? You're meeting with somebody at B2B level. The first thing I always do is put myself in their position. So if I'm talking to I'm talking to an operations guy, right? I can even talk to the CEO, it doesn't matter. If I'm talking to an operations guy, what are my concerns? As an operations guy, what is this guy worried about? Well, he has to have smooth operations. Why? Because at the end of the day, he has to keep production up. They have to be efficient, and they have to hit their delivery numbers, right? So those are the things I would start thinking, that's what he's worried about, right? So now I can begin to, now, this is what I know he's worried about, right, Jason? This is what I know he's worried about, and this is what I know I have to offer. So here are his concerns, right? I really try to figure out, what is this guy worried about, right? So I list out all the things he's worried about. And then I look at my product or service that I'm offering. And then here's where I would develop the questions. If I know he's worried about delivery, well then, and I know how my product can help him with delivery, then I start structuring questions on there. So for example, I said, Jason, I said, one of your biggest pressure points, you're the operations guy now, Jason, one of your biggest pressure points is that, you have to hit certain delivery. Is that a fair statement? He'll say, of course it is, Victor. I said, right now, out of curiosity, what's your delivery time for X products? He says, on average, it's this or that. And then you're going to talk about variations in delivery, right? Because now you're going to get into some detail. And he says, yeah, depending on the product, we have some delivery issues. I said, what do you think are your top 3 reasons for something being delayed? What are your top 3 reasons? One of my favorite questions. Well, what are the top 3 reasons you think you miss a delivery date? Great question, right? He's going to say, well, let me think about that. I always ask for 3 because sometimes they only give me 1. If I just say, hey, can you think of one idea? You'll probably get that, but I always ask for 3. And they'll say, I think it's this, Victor. I think it's this. And then if I keep pushing, I might get a 3rd one. And what I typically find out is that by having 3, I have more material to work with. So now I understand 3 reasons why the deliveries are delayed. So now in my mind, I'm thinking, how can I begin to help them, right? This is where part of this is the location piece, right? You're locating the problem. You're locating where they're having problems and how you can help them. Now, if you can figure this out, they got problems, I can help them, then I can begin to extract value because I know I can probably help them accelerate or hit those delivery times. That is the short answer. Hope that was good enough, Jason. Let me see. What do we got here? I'm a sales rep for firefighting equipment. Our company is well known in the capital of Saudi Arabia. I've been to Jeddah, Matt. And it says, I just started looking for new customers in another, and you left me there with nothing else. In another, is this the second part? Big city. I need advice. That's too big of a question, man. I mean, Bushra, if you're going into a new city, I would always ask myself, in the existing city where you're selling at, how are people buying? Where do they go find the equipment? So it's really about a matter of finding either a good list or figuring out where they fish. You know what I mean by that? In other words, if I'm going into a new city, let's say I'm doing sales training. If I'm doing sales training and I go into a new city, I go to Saudi Arabia, I go to Jeddah, right? The first question I'm going to ask myself is, who would buy my sales training? Who's more likely to buy? Second, who's more likely to pay me more? I start narrowing the field, right? So we can start broad. Everybody probably needs sales training that has a company, but I can't sell to everybody. What market segments will probably pay a lot of money? Technology companies. Oh, technology companies would pay for sales training. What technology companies are in need of more sales training than ever that are growing faster? Well, some companies are going online, so they don't need a lot of salespeople, but maybe people who are doing more face-to-face conversations need more sales training. What type of companies would be that? That would be large equipment companies. Okay, telecom. So I move up to, let's say, telecom. I pick telecom. Telecom, large equipment companies. Bam, I focus on that and I begin my marketing strategy. That's the short answer, man. That's a big question, though. Got it. You see what I mean, Jason? It's pretty simple. Just try tying it back and forth to their value. But if you remember the value trinity, I think you'll never get lost because, again, everybody's trying to find a way to save money. All right, let me see what this one has. And is there any question you're expecting from us that we haven't asked you yet? No, not really. I wanted to stick to just creating value. If I were to say, what questions should you be asking me? I think Jason asked a good one is, what questions do you develop? Because I think it's important that I always say that the average salesperson practices what to say. The best salespeople practice what to ask. Because in asking powerful questions, asking insightful questions, that's when people start viewing you differently. It is the quality of your questions that will depend on the quality of your conversations. I don't know if I can emphasize that or not. It is the quality of your questions that will determine the quality of your conversations. So if you go in there and ask, well, how long have you been in business? How do you like this business? These are stupid questions. These are stupid questions because, one, you should have looked online to see how long they've been in business. Two, you don't need to ask them about whether they like it or not. Let's assume they like it because they're still in the business. What they want from you is a good conversation. They're thinking, I've given you time to talk to me. What do you got? And forget about all the small talk up front, like, hey, how you doing? How's your family? Hey, I see you like boating. I see you like fishing. Forget all that stuff. Go there with the intent to say, look, I've studied your company. I said, there's several things I've looked at, and I think I have a solution for some of your, processes. But before I do that, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. Is that okay? What do you think they're going to say? Sure, go ahead. And then the quality of your questions. If you're asking great questions, I call them what I call, like tier 1 questions. Tier 3 questions are very basic. How are you doing? Do you like your business? Is your business growing? Tier 2 questions, where do you find places that you can improve? But tier 1 questions, this is where you're delivering insight. This is where you know as much as they do and maybe just a little more. If you say something like this to a CEO, I've been studying your industry for the last 2 years. I've talked to several CEOs in this industry, and here's what they tell me, that the 2 biggest problems you're facing today is this and that. Is that true? They're going to be like, yeah, that's true. Immediately, we talk about building credibility. That's how you do it. Because your questions pretty much transmit how much you know about their industry. But if you go in there asking these tier 3, tier 2 questions, you're not going to be taken seriously. And don't be afraid. One of my favorite books, I keep emphasizing this, is The Challenger Sale. If you haven't read The Challenger Sale, you should really read this book. It came out in December of 2011, which makes you think, well, it's 9 years old, how valuable can it be? It is valuable because the Challenger Sale has such a great model for having a conversation with people that to me, it changed the game. And it really is the updated version. If you're selling B2B, you should have read the Challenger Sale. I highly recommend it. And it's a very powerful book on how to have great conversations with your customer. And it ties into a lot of the stuff we talked about today. So hopefully that answered that. Let me grab one more and I'm out of here. As a salesperson, what do you suggest would be a good quality of questions for someone who is in the steel servicing industry? The thing is, see, you're asking me to give you questions. I can only lead you to the question. Every industry has great questions. The thing is, here's what I'd like you to do, Abbas. Find somebody who knows the we have to think about. We have to think about, obviously, the quality of our questions, right? But then we also have to think about intent. Like, what are we trying to do? Because it's your intent that will drive the quality of the questions. What do I mean by that? If I'm talking to a CEO and my job is to sell them marketing services, well, the type of questions I would ask would be very differently as opposed to me going in there trying to sell them, let's say, equipment, right? Upstream or downstream equipment, right? It would be totally different quality questions or a different set of questions. So it is depending on what your intent, what you're trying to sell. But if you know your product well enough and you know their industry well enough and you know where you can help them, then your job is to ask questions that lead them to your product. So for example, if you're offering a specific solution, your solution is X, this is what we're offering, then you got to ask yourself from the beginning, what are their needs? This is what I'm offering, these are their needs. So if I know what their needs are, I want to lead them to my solution. So I'm going to ask questions that lead to my solution. For example, I sell sales training, right? So I want to lead them here. They need sales training. It's a steel company. They're here. Sales. Here's Victor with sales, right? And here's you with your steel company. Now, the questions I'm going to ask you to get you here have to do with your industry. I would ask a question like this. In today's market, what is the average close rate for someone in your industry? He's going to say, I think it's about 40%, right? I said, is that above or below your competitor's closing rate? Is that above or below the industry norm? So they're going to have to tell me if it's above or below. If they tell me it's below, that's an indication they might need more training, right? If they tell me it's above, that means they're doing exceptionally well in training. So if it's above, no, we're way ahead of the industry. Then I would ask them, well, tell me what you're doing to stay ahead of the industry that your competitors aren't doing. Now he's going to give me some insight into what they're doing, understand their process, right? And in him giving me information about what they're doing that the others are not doing, I might find that they're doing these things over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're doing this right, this right, this right. He goes, but when it comes to presenting, maybe there's a weakness there, and maybe that's where I can help. So as I'm asking these questions, I'm trying to figure out how I can help them, and usually I lead them to my solution. I say, well, Mr. Customer, when it comes to generating leads and opportunities, apparently you don't need help there. When it comes to close rates, apparently you don't need help there. Even when it comes to the average deal size, you don't need help there. But one of the things that you consistently told me is that your sales cycle is too long. Now, I've identified the problem. I said, now, so I've located the problem. Long sales cycle, right? Got the long sales cycle. Now, my job is to begin to extract value. What does that mean? Mr. Customer, if you were to shorten your sales cycle from 3 months to, let's say, 2 months, what would that mean in terms of revenue and sales effectivity, or in terms of cost of sales? What would that mean? And now they would begin to tell me. And then now I lead them to that solution. So that I would sell my ability in training to shorten the sales cycle. This is why I'd like to talk to you about. Now I've located, I can extract that. And by the extract, I go, if we can shorten that by 1 month, what would that mean in terms of revenue? And I can do some quick numbers in my head. Now I begin to have a conversation. Well, let me tell you what we do here. With my sales training, here's what we do. When we talk about the sales cycle, here's some of the strategies we use. Here's some of the things we work on, and then you propose a price. Get the idea? So you can play with that all day. It's really dependent on your industry. So there's a lot more questions coming. I've gone a little bit too long. Thank you guys again. Again, do me a favor. Share this with somebody else, at least one person I always ask you to do. That's the price of listening to me, man. If you can just share this with one other person, just send them the link. And by the way, don't forget to hit wherever that like button is at, hit the like button, man. Just hit the like button if you really like this, and we'll try to do this again. On that note, I'm out of here, folks. Thank you guys. And remember, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care.